My name is Cassie Marlowe. I'm 29 years old, and 6 weeks ago I watched my mother straighten her blazer, smooth her hair, and walk into a lawyer's office like she was collecting a prize she'd already mentally spent. She had a list in her purse. I know because I saw it fall out when she reached for her phone. A handwritten list. Renovations, a new car, a beach condo deposit. She didn't know what was in that room waiting for her. None of them did. The lawyer read one sentence, just one, and my mother's list became the most expensive piece of paper she ever wrote on. Here's what I need you to understand before I take you back to that room. My grandfather, Raymond Earl Hollis, spent the last 4 years of his life in a care facility 11 miles from my parents' house. 11 miles. My parents made that drive exactly twice. I made it 314 times. I counted. Because somewhere around visit number 40, I started keeping a journal. Not for proof, not for leverage. I just needed somewhere to put everything I was feeling. That journal saved me. And, in a way, it saved my grandfather's truth, too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I take you back to the beginning, if this kind of story hits close to home, the kind where one person carries everything while everyone else carries expectations, take a second to like and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, just because it means someone else will find this and maybe feel a little less alone. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let me tell you about Raymond. My grandfather built things with his hands his entire life. Literally. He was a finish carpenter in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Crown molding, custom cabinetry, hand-cut dovetail joints. The kind of work that takes 40 years to master and 5 seconds to appreciate when you don't know what you're looking at. He was quiet, deliberate. He smelled like sawdust and coffee. He had a laugh that started slow, like an engine turning over, and then just took over the whole room. He and my grandmother, Eloise, had 2 kids. My uncle Dennis, who moved to Oregon in 1998 and sends a Christmas card most years, and my mother, Patricia. Patty to everyone who knew her before she decided she preferred Patricia. My grandmother died when I was 11. A stroke. Fast, no warning. And after that, it was just Grandpa Raymond in the house on Sycamore Lane. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a workshop in the back where he still built things even after his hands started shaking. My parents, my mom and my dad Frank, lived 20 minutes away. I lived 45. Guess which one of us showed up? My mother's relationship with her father was complicated in the way that sounds polite when you say it out loud, and only makes sense when you've watched it for 29 years. She loved him. I genuinely believe that. She just loved the idea of him more. The version of Raymond Hollis that was productive, useful, the version that had assets. When I was 16, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen after a Sunday dinner at Grandpa's house. My dad said something about property values in Hendersonville going up. My mom said, "That house will be worth something real in another 10 years. Not he, not Dad, that house. I was 16 and I still felt the cold of it. Over the years, my parents developed what I can only describe as a maintenance relationship with Grandpa Raymond. Holidays, yes, his birthday usually. When something needed doing around the house that they could point to later, absolutely. But the ordinary Tuesdays? The random Saturdays when he was just an old man who wanted someone to sit with him on the porch and tell him how the week went, those belonged to me. I don't say that to make myself the hero of this story. I'm really not. I say it because what happened in that lawyer's office only makes sense if you understand what the years before it looked like. When Grandpa Raymond turned 78, he had a fall. Nothing catastrophic. He caught himself on the workshop doorframe, bruised his hip, scared himself more than anything. But my mother decided, without asking him, without really discussing it, that he needed to move somewhere with proper support. She toured one facility. One. Sunrise Ridge, 40 minutes from their house, 11 miles. Shared common areas, linoleum floors, a dining room with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly all day long. The kind of place that has motivational posters in the hallway and hand sanitizer dispensers every 6 feet and somehow still smells like something is being covered up. Monthly rate, $2,800. My grandfather's workshop sold to cover the first year, the workshop he'd built by hand in 1987. I found out the way I found out most things in this family, from someone who wasn't my parents. His neighbor Hank called me. "Cassie, they came with a truck on Wednesday. Your grandfather looked like a man being taken somewhere he didn't agree to go." I drove to Sunrise Ridge that same night. Grandpa was sitting in a chair by the window of his room. Small room. One window, faced a parking lot. He had a quilt on his lap that my grandmother had made. He'd carried it there himself, I think, because nothing else in that room was his. He looked at me when I walked in and said, "Cassandra, you found me." Like he wasn't sure anyone would. I sat with him for 3 hours. I drove home and I cried the whole way. And then I came back that Friday, and the Friday after that, and the one after that. Here's the thing about visiting someone in a place like Sunrise Ridge. The first few times, you notice everything. The smell, the sounds, the other residents who don't have visitors. After a while, you stop noticing, and you just start being there. I knew which nurses were kind and which ones were exhausted past kindness. I knew that Grandpa's roommate, Gerald, liked the window open even in November, and that Grandpa never complained about it. I knew that Tuesdays were meatloaf, and Grandpa hated meatloaf, so I'd bring him a turkey sandwich from the deli on Route 9 every Tuesday without him ever having to ask. My mother visited Sunrise Ridge 4 times in 3 years. I know this because I signed the visitor log every single time I came, and once, out of morbid curiosity, I looked up the entries under Patricia Marlowe. 4. One of those was Christmas, when my dad came too, and they stayed for 40 minutes, and my mother took a photo of herself and Grandpa for her Facebook page captioned, "Making memories with the ones who matter." He'd been wearing the same cardigan for 2 weeks because the laundry service kept losing his clothes. I bought him 3 new ones the next week and labeled them with a marker inside the collar. He told me that was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. We laughed about it every visit after that. "Laundry-proofed," he'd say. "You think of everything." I didn't think of everything. I just thought of him. Grandpa Raymond died on a Thursday in March. Pneumonia, which had moved fast. He'd had a cough for 2 weeks that I'd been watching, and I'd talked to the nursing staff about it. And then one morning my phone rang at 6 a.m., and it was the facility director, and the call was short. I got there before the body was removed. I held his hand and told him everything I should have said out loud more often. I don't know if he heard me. I think he did. I choose to believe he did. My mother arrived 2 hours later. She cried loudly in the hallway in a way that made the nurses come check on her. My grandfather's room was quiet. She didn't go in. 4 days after the funeral, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, measured, careful. "Cassie, this is Martin Shea. I'm an estate attorney in Hendersonville. Your grandfather asked me to contact you directly. There's a will reading scheduled for the 14th. Your grandfather was very specific. You need to be there. And Cassie," a pause, "don't tell your parents I called you first." I sat down on my kitchen floor, right there on the tile, and I stayed there for a long time. I called my great-aunt Beverly that night. My grandfather's older sister, 81 years old, still drives herself to church every Sunday, still wins at cards, still says exactly what she means with the kind of precision that only comes from not caring anymore what anyone thinks of it. "Aunt Bev, did you know Grandpa changed his will?" A pause. "Raymond changed that will 5 years ago, sweetheart, right after your mother moved him to that place without asking him." "She moved him without—" "He told me. He said, 'Bev, I had 40 years in that workshop, and she sold it for first and last month's rent.'" He wasn't angry, Cassie. Your grandfather was never angry. He was just done. People can love someone and still be done. I asked her if she knew what was in it. "I know enough," she said. "I know he kept a record of everything. Raymond was a carpenter. He measured twice and cut once his whole life. You think he didn't do the same thing with his estate?" She told me one more thing before she hung up. "Wear something comfortable. This is going to take a while." March 14th, 10 a.m. Shea and Associates occupied the second floor of a brick building on Main Street in Hendersonville. Dark wood, tall bookshelves, the kind of office that smells like old leather and something permanent, like decisions made here stayed made. My parents were already there. Of course they were. My mother had dressed like she was going to a closing. Blazer, heels, her good earrings. She had a leather portfolio in front of her on the conference table like she was there to make a counteroffer. My dad, Frank, sat beside her, elbows on the table, leg bouncing under the surface. He'd been speculating for weeks. I knew because my cousin Jamie had texted me. Uncle Frank told my dad the house alone is worth at least $400,000. Uncle Dennis had flown in from Oregon. He sat across from my parents, looking uncomfortable in a way I recognized as guilty. He hadn't visited either. He knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. Aunt Beverly sat beside me. She smelled like lavender and peppermint, and she put her hand on mine when I sat down and didn't move it. Two of my grandfather's oldest friends, Walt and Carol Dupree, sat at the far end. They'd known him since 1974. Walt had worked beside him for 11 years. They'd been there at Sunrise Ridge more times than my mother had. I'd run into them in the parking lot twice. Martin Shea entered quietly. He was younger than I expected, mid-40s. He sat down, opened a file, and looked around the table without ceremony. "Thank you all for being here. Shall we begin?" My mother straightened in her chair. This was it. Everything she'd been waiting for. Shea read the standard language first. Name, date, county of filing. I watched my mother's hands on the table. Still, patient. The hands of a woman absolutely certain of what was coming. Shea turned the first page. Regarding the residential property at 411 Sycamore Lane, Hendersonville, the home, contents, and all associated land, I leave this in its entirety to my granddaughter, Cassandra Ann Marlowe. My mother's hand moved, fast, like a reflex. She grabbed the edge of the table. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was perfectly level, which somehow made it worse. "Say that again?" "The property at 411 Sycamore Lane is bequeathed in full to Cassandra Marlowe." "That's—" She looked at my father, then at Shea. "That's the family home. That's my father's home." "Yes, ma'am." "He can't— She's not even—" Patricia stopped. She rearranged herself, recalibrated. I watched it happen in real time, the emotional reaction being pushed down, the strategic persona coming back up. She folded her hands. "I think there may be some confusion about the document. My father was in declining health. He may not have fully understood." "Your father had full cognitive assessments on file with this office," Shea said. "I'll get to that. Let me continue." He turned another page. "Regarding all financial accounts, investment holdings, and liquid assets, these are bequeathed in their entirety to Cassandra Ann Marlowe." My father stood up, chair scraping, the sound filling the whole room. "That's my father-in-law's money." He wasn't yelling. That was almost worse. He was speaking with the tight, controlled fury of a man who had already mentally spent something. "That is his life savings. You can't just—" "I can read it again if that would help," Shea said. "The language is unambiguous." "We'll contest this." My mother again, smooth, immediate. "We'll contest every word of it." Shea looked at her. "That is your right, Mrs. Marlowe, but I'd ask you to let me finish first." He reached into the file and produced a sealed envelope, off-white, heavy paper, my grandfather's handwriting on the front, careful, slightly shaky in the way it had gotten in his last year, block letters. To be read aloud, R-E-H. My mother's eyes went to it immediately. She knew that handwriting. She knew exactly what it was. "Your grandfather," Shea said, left a personal letter. He instructed me to read it aloud to everyone present. He specified that it should be read regardless of how the initial terms were received. "You're not reading a personal letter in front of—" "Patricia," Aunt Beverly's voice, quiet, absolute, the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time to use it. "Let him read." My mother looked at her. Something crossed her face. She sat down. Shay broke the seal, unfolded 2 pages, adjusted his glasses. The room contracted. "I'll read this exactly as Raymond wrote it," he said. He cleared his throat. "Patty." Just her name. Not "Dear Patricia," not "My daughter," just Patty, the name she'd spent 20 years asking people not to use. My mother's jaw tightened. "If Martin is reading this out loud, it means you came to this room expecting something, and it means you're angry that it isn't yours. I've known that was coming for a long time. I want you to know that I didn't make this decision to hurt you. I made it because for the last 4 years of my life, I had to tell the truth to myself about my family. And the truth is this: you have been waiting for me to die since your mother did. I don't say that with anger. I say it because I spent too many years pretending not to see it, and pretending didn't help either of us." My father was looking at the table, not at my mother, not at me, at a fixed point on the wood grain, like if he stared hard enough he could disappear into it. "I remember the workshop," Shay continued. "I built that workshop the year you were born, Patty, 1967. I framed every wall, I set every beam. Your mother brought me coffee at midnight because she said I'd forget to eat, which was true. That workshop took me 6 weeks, and I was prouder of it than almost anything I ever built. You sold it for $2,800. I found out from Hank Boucher." Walt Dupree closed his eyes. "I remember the house." Shay's voice stayed even, steady. "I remember every corner of that house. I built Cassie's first bookshelf in that house when she was 4 years old. She picked the wood herself. She said she wanted it to smell like Grandpa's workshop, and I let her help sand it, and she got sawdust in her hair and she laughed so hard she fell off the sawhorse. I thought about that a lot in my room at Sunrise Ridge, looking at a parking lot." The sound my Aunt Beverly made was very quiet, like something letting go. "You came to see me 4 times in 3 years, Patty. I want you to hear that number spoken out loud in a room full of people who can tell you how many times they came, so you understand what 4 means. You came at Christmas with your husband and a gift basket, and you stayed 40 minutes, and I watched you take a photo of yourself next to my chair, and I thought, she is going to post that. And you did. And the caption said, 'Family First.' I know what family first looks like. Cassie showed me every Tuesday with a turkey sandwich." My mother's face was rigid, a mask. But her hands were in her lap now, and the portfolio was forgotten, and the leather blazer didn't fit the room anymore. Nothing she'd brought fit the room anymore. "I want to say something about Cassie." Shay looked up at me briefly, then back down. "She never came here for anything. Not once. I tested this, quietly, the way old men test things because they have nothing but time and they've been hurt enough to get careful. I told her once, offhand, that I was thinking of putting the house in her name early, just to see. She told me not to. She said, 'Grandpa, I don't need it. I just need you to stop talking about dying.' And then she changed the subject and read me 3 chapters of Lonesome Dove. That was the moment I decided. Not because she turned it down, because she meant it. There wasn't a calculation behind it. She just wanted to be there. That is so rare, Patty, that I stopped taking it for granted a long time ago, and I started writing it down instead." He turned the 2nd page. "I kept a journal of her visits," Shay read. 314 entries over 4 years. Every date, every time she arrived, every time she left, and one detail from each visit. I want to read 3 of them. My mother made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was something smaller than a word. November 11th, 2021. Cassie arrived at 10 a.m. Brought meatloaf Tuesday from the deli. Turkey, no meatloaf. Fixed the lamp Gerald broke last week without telling anyone. Left at 4:30. When she hugged me goodbye, she held on longer than usual. I think she could tell it had been a hard week. She didn't say anything about it. She just held on longer. December 25th, 2022. Cassie arrived at 8:15 a.m. She brought a small pine tree, a real one in a pot, because I told her once in 2019 that the plastic ones in the common room made the holiday feel like a waiting room. She remembered. We watched White Christmas. She fell asleep in the chair. I let her sleep for an hour because she looked exhausted, and I didn't want her to stop coming because this place wore her out. February 4th, 2023. Cassie brought new cardboard she'd labeled with her phone number and taped inside my cabinet door. She said, in case anyone loses the other one. She didn't make a big thing of it. She just taped it there and kept talking about the book we were reading. She does things like that, small things, without announcement, without needing credit for them. I have been writing her name in this journal for 4 years, and I have never once written it and felt anything but grateful. The room was silent. Carol Dupree was crying openly. Walt had his hand over his mouth. Dennis, my uncle from Oregon, was staring at the wall with the look of a man who had just counted all the times he hadn't come and arrived at a number he couldn't live with comfortably. Aunt Beverly wasn't crying. She was perfectly still, the way people are still when they've known something was true for a long time and they're watching the rest of the world catch up. My father had both hands over his face. My mother was sitting completely upright, completely controlled, with tears running down both cheeks that she was not acknowledging, as though if she didn't acknowledge them, they didn't count. Her blazer sleeve was right there. She didn't move. Shay set the pages down. Raymond added one final paragraph, he said, written separately in a different pen near the end. He cleared his throat once more. Cassie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let them make you feel guilty about this. Don't let them tell you this was manipulation or that I wasn't in my right mind. I was in my right mind every single day you walked through that door. I was in my right mind every time I opened this journal and wrote your name. Love is not complicated, sweetheart. It's just presence. You were present. Now go live your life. Build something. Make it last. That's all I ever asked of anyone. Grandpa Raymond. Shay closed the file. He folded his hands. And that was it. That was all of it. My mother stood up. Her chair was quiet. She pushed it back carefully, deliberately, the same way she'd done everything in that room. Controlled to the last second. She looked at me. I want to tell you she said something that mattered, something that cracked the whole thing open and let real light in. She said, "We'll be in touch with our attorney." And she walked out. My father followed her, one hand on her back, the way he'd followed her in and out of 100 rooms before this one. Dennis stayed. He sat at that table for a long time after they left. He finally looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, Cassie. I know that doesn't... I know. I'm sorry." I told him it was okay. It wasn't entirely okay, but it was true enough. Walt Dupree shook my hand with both of his and said, "Raymond was right about you. He said it more times than you'd believe." Aunt Beverly waited until the room was mostly empty. Then she looked at me and said, "You need lunch. I'm buying. And then you're going to let me tell you every single thing your grandfather said about you when you weren't there. There's a lot. It'll take a while." We went to lunch. It took almost 3 hours. I cried twice. She didn't, but she refilled my water glass both times without me asking, which is her version of the same thing. My parents hired an attorney within the week. The claim was diminished capacity and undue influence. Undue influence. For turkey sandwiches and labeled cardigans. Shay was ready. He had the cognitive assessments. 2 doctors, independent of each other, both certified at the time of signing. He had the journal, the original, 314 entries in my grandfather's own hand. He had the witness statements from 3 nurses at Sunrise Ridge, and he had a video. My grandfather, 8 months before he died, sitting in his room, clean shirt, good light, looking directly at the camera with the exact same steady calm he'd had his entire life. He spoke for 17 minutes. He named my mother. He named my father. He named me. He explained his reasoning in the quiet, deliberate way he explained everything. The way a man who spent 40 years measuring twice before he cut once explains something that matters. He did not shake. His voice did not waver. He looked at the camera like a man who had thought about this moment for a long time and was not afraid of it. My parents' attorney watched the video in Shay's office. He advised them to drop the case that same afternoon. My mother called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. She said, "You should know that what you've done to this family cannot be undone. Your grandfather was a lonely old man and you took advantage of that. I hope you can live with yourself." I saved the voicemail. Not to use it, just so I'd always have proof of what she chose to say when she had the chance to say anything. I deleted it 6 months later. I didn't need it anymore.
The boat went first. My parents had bought it 3 years earlier. I found out through a cousin. A 24-footer kept at a marina 2 hours away, used maybe 4 times total. My father's retirement dream. It sold for $31,000. The listing said, "Motivated seller." The legal fees took most of it. My mother's presence in her social circle in Hendersonville, she'd kept ties there even after moving away. The church connections, the garden club, the curated Facebook life, quietly rearranged itself. Nobody announced anything. Nobody made a statement. People just started calling less. Committee positions were offered to someone else. The phone got quieter. In small communities, reputation doesn't collapse. It just slowly stops being maintained by the people around you. And when nobody's propping it up anymore, you start to see how much of it was always scaffolding. Aunt Beverly told me some of this. I didn't look it up myself. I had stopped looking. Not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. The point was never to watch them fall. It was to stop falling with them. I moved into the house on Sycamore Lane in May. The first night, I walked every room, slowly, with the lights off and then the lights on and then the lights off again, just to know it, to learn the way it breathed. The workshop foundation was still in the backyard. My parents had sold the structure, but the concrete pad was still there, cracked in one corner, a little sunken on the right side, edged with grass that had been growing through the gaps for 5 years. I stood on it for a long time. Then I called a carpenter. Not to rebuild the workshop exactly, something different. A reading room. Glass walls, good insulation, a wood stove for winter. Shelves along every wall, the way my grandfather built shelves. Solid, measured, built to outlast the person who made them. I planted new hydrangeas along the front walk. The old ones had died, but the soil was good, deep and well kept, and it remembered what it was for. I transferred to the Henderson County Library System, head of reference, smaller staff, bigger windows, a reading program on Wednesday afternoons for kids whose parents work late. I started therapy in September. My therapist is a quiet woman named Dr. Okafor. And in our 3rd session, she said something that I've been turning over ever since. You've spent most of your life earning love that should have been given to you for free. That's not your fault, but it's worth noticing how much energy that took. I'm noticing. I'm learning what it feels like when something doesn't cost anything. 3 months after I moved in, I was organizing Grandpa's desk, clearing space, making it mine while keeping it his. And I found a smaller notebook tucked behind the larger journal. Thinner, newer. I opened it. It wasn't a log of visits. It was instructions. Not legal instructions, personal ones. Written in the last year, I think, when his handwriting had gotten slower and more deliberate. The back left burner runs hot. Use the right one for anything that needs a simmer. The porch step, third from the top, needs a new nail every spring. I use a 3-inch deck screw now instead. Works better. The hydrangeas need deep water twice a week in July, not more. They'll tell you when they're happy. The workshop foundation. I'm sorry I couldn't leave you that too. I hope you build something there. Build it the way I taught you. Measure twice. There's a key taped to the inside back cover of the Lonesome Dove on the second shelf. It's for a safe deposit box at First National. I left something inside for you. Not money, something better. I found the key. I went to the bank. Inside the box was a folded piece of paper and a photograph. The photograph was of me and Grandpa on the porch, the summer before he went to Sunrise Ridge. Both of us in the swing, me reading out loud, him with his eyes closed and his head back, and this expression on his face that I can't fully describe. Peace, maybe. The specific kind that comes from not needing anything to be different than it is. On the back, in his handwriting, this was a good day. There were many. The folded paper was a list, not of assets, not of instructions. A list of moments. First Lonesome Dove chapter. Sawdust in Your Hair, 1998. The cardigan labels. The time you fixed Gerald's window with a piece of cardboard and tape and didn't tell the staff so Gerald wouldn't feel embarrassed. Christmas tree in a pot. Every turkey sandwich, no meatloaf. At the bottom, one line. I don't think she knows how much it mattered. I hope she finds out. I sat on the floor of the bank and I read that list 4 times, and then I folded it carefully and put it back in the box. And I thought, I know now, Grandpa. I know. I'm sitting on the porch as I tell you this. It's an evening in late October. The light is going gold and the oak tree in the front yard is turning. Grandpa planted that tree the year he and my grandmother moved in. It's taller than the house now, wide enough that the porch sits in its shade by 2 in the afternoon. He measured where to plant it, I think, knew exactly where the shade would fall 40 years later. That's the thing about people who measure twice. They think in decades. They build for the version of the world they won't live to see. I have not spoken to my parents since the voicemail. My mother sent a letter once. It was long. It used the word family 14 times and the word sorry 0 times. I read it completely because I wanted to understand. And then I put it in a drawer and wrote back 3 sentences. I received your letter. I'm not ready to talk. I wish you well. I meant all 3 things. The reading room is finished. My contractor, a man named Earl, who is 73 and has been building things in Henderson County since before I was born, ran his hand along one of the shelves at the end and said, "Good grain, good cut, solid work." He didn't know that was the highest thing he could have said. I brought my grandfather's tools in and hung them on the wall above the wood stove. Not to use them, just to have them there. Just so the room remembers what it came from. The scholarship launched this year, the Raymond Earl Hollis Scholarship. $5,000 annually, awarded to a Henderson County student pursuing a trade. Carpentry, electrician, masonry, the kind of work that makes things that last. The first recipient is a 19-year-old named Marcus who wants to be a finish carpenter. He's never heard of my grandfather. He will. My name is Cassie Marlowe. I'm 29 years old. I drive 45 minutes to work in the morning, and I listen to audiobooks the whole way. And I stop at the deli on Route 9 every Tuesday out of a habit I haven't been able to break, and I don't want to. I didn't get rich from this story. After taxes, legal fees, the scholarship, the reading room, and the new roof this old house needed badly, what I have is enough. Enough that I stop doing the math at 3 a.m. Enough that I work at a job I love and come home to a house that holds someone I loved and sleep in a room where the window faces east and the light wakes me up gently, which is how my grandfather said all mornings should start. But the inheritance was never the number. The inheritance was in a notebook in a desk drawer. 314 entries. Every turkey sandwich. Every chapter read aloud. Every labeled cardigan. Every fixed lamp. Every time I held on a little longer at the door because I could tell it had been a hard week. He saw all of it. He wrote it down. He kept count. Because that's what you do when someone shows up for you and you want them to know, someday, somehow, that it was never invisible, that it was the whole point. I didn't stay because I expected anything. I stayed because he was my grandfather, and he was alone, and the alternative was unlivable to me. But if you are the person in your family who stays, who drives the 2.5 hours, who sits in the hospital chair, who brings the food nobody asked for and fixes the things nobody noticed were broken, I want you to hear this. Someone is writing your name down, even if they never tell you, even if you never find the notebook. They see you. My grandfather saw me, and at the end of everything, when the room was quiet and the letter was read and the list was real, that was the only thing that mattered. Go home and water something. Fix the step that's been loose all season. Call the person you've been meaning to call. Do the thing that doesn't announce itself. That's what lasts. I have one question for you, and I want you to really sit with it. Is there someone in your life right now, a grandparent, a parent, a friend, who is waiting for you to show up? Not for a holiday, not for an occasion, just on an ordinary day for no reason except that they matter. Drop still time in the comments if the answer is yes and you're going to do something about it. Drop I showed up if you're already that person in your family. I'll read every single one. And if this story made you think of someone who always showed up for you, someone who saw you when everyone else looked past you, share this with them. Let them know you remember. Some things are worth saying out loud, even now, even late, especially then.